Alright, there's some things I like to show about what's going on here. I'm actually impressed I turned to more or less the page I wanted to. Genesis 1, I don't want to go over that one right now. Although I have some things to say about that that I think make a lot of sense. Anyway, Genesis 2. So, there's some things going on here that is generally ignored. I'm actually going to start here, right? So this is Hebrew over here, English over here. If I read anything, it's going to be the English. Alright, blah, 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 blah. Here you have basically a repeat of the creation story. Here, this is the seventh day where God rests. Basically, that's what's going on here. And it says, such is the story of heaven and earth when they were created. Right, that's how this section ends. Right, but then here, when the Lord God made earth and heaven, when no shrub in the field was yet on earth, and no grasses in the field had been sprouted, because the Lord God had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the soil, but a flow would well up from the ground and water the whole surface of the earth. So here, you have ground before you have water, which is different from Genesis 1. And then Lord God formed man from the dust of the earth, blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and placed there the man whom he had formed. And you should notice, so here we have the ground first, then the water, then man, and then after this come the animals and, plants, and then animals and, whatever. But also right here in 8. Let's see. I'm not very good at reading Hebrew. I think that's it. So it mentions already, it uses the word Adam. It's not a name. It just means like person. Right, so this is the first person that God made. Which is important. And then, carrying on. So he planted the garden, and from the ground the Lord caused to grow every tree that was pleasing. So this is after you have the first man, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and bad. And a river issues from Eden to water the garden, and it then divides and becomes 4 branches. The name of the first is blah 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 blah. This part I don't think is actually that important. The name of the second river, the name of the third river. Okay. The Lord God, I feel like these are actually added in by a separate author at a later point. Maybe not. That's my interpretation. The Lord God took the man and placed him in the garden to till, to tend it. He commanded man, of every tree of the garden you are free to eat, but as for the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat of it, for as soon as you eat of it, you shall die. And then he said, it's not good for man to be alone, make a helper. So he formed out of the earth all the wild beasts. So we have a sequence of creation of ground first, then water, then man, then plants, now animals. And they're called whatever he calls them. But for Adam no fitting helper was found. So God cast a deep sleep unto the man, and while he slept he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at that spot. Now, here, this spot, this part right here, I feel like this one is misinterpreted very, very widely. Okay, so think about this. God is creating a new life from the first person. And this is going to be a stereotypical, it's going to be the prototype for how birth occurs from now on. So what happens is God is effectively midwifing the birth of Eve. That's what's occurring here. Now, when he reaches into Adam's body, that should create a vagina and a uterus. That act. And then when he grabs material inside Adam's body to pull it out, that creates the fetus. And then when he pulls it out, that's the birth. And what is left over, because we know at the end that Adam is the male, this flesh that is closing up the spot should be the penis and the scrotum. And the rib that's removed, if you notice, a lot of mammal species have a penis bone, a baculum, and it looks like a rib. Humans don't have this. So, we have in humans a missing rib-like bone associated with a sexual difference between men and women, a physiological difference that is related to procreation. I'm pretty sure that's what this is talking about. I think the rib that is removed is the penis bone, and I think the flesh that closes up the spot is the penis, and the spot, the open spot, was the vagina and the uterus, and the removed tissue was the fetus. So yeah, and Lord God fashioned the rib and that he taken from man and made it into woman and brought her to the man and said, "This one at last is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, and shall be called woman, for from man she was taken." But again, the word for man I think, I could be wrong about this. I'm not seeing it. I might be wrong about this in this case. Alright, I'll have to look into that. Hence, now this is important. Hence a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, so that they become one flesh. So now in sexual intercourse, the opening that was created by God when he midwifed Eve, well, when he midwifed for Adam in the birth of Eve, that flesh that is pulled out, the penis, fills the vagina. This now makes sense. They become one flesh. You both become sort of unified into like what the original prototype for a human was, with no genitalia. The penis is now inside the woman, and now, like, in a sense, it's now sort of a part of her, and not a part of the man. From a certain, like, if you look at it a certain way. But yeah, so you have this reversed sequence of creation, and I think you have this misinterpreted, like it's not literally a rib, I don't think. I think this is, the rib that is being spoken of, probably a penis bone. And it's probably not irrelevant that kosher food, kosher animals, none of them have penis bones. It's like, monkeys are not kosher. Also, if you look at animals that look the most like humans, like monkeys, they do have a penis bone. And at some point, the people that are creating these stories are going to be aware of that. They're going to have come across skeletons of monkeys. Probably at some point deep enough in the past, they'll have actually hunted monkeys for food and known about this. They're like, oh, huh. And they'll have seen human corpses and human skeletons and noted that there's a difference here. There's an extra bone in these guys than there is in humans. Why? And then it's probably somewhat relevant that kosher animals don't have penis bones. Not all animals that don't have a penis bone are kosher, but all of the animals that are kosher lack a penis bone, right? So that I feel like that's probably relevant because there's probably a reasoning there that these were specially made by God for man to eat, right? Something like that. But there's another thing in here that I think is important. When God talks about not eating the fruit, Eve doesn't exist yet. And if you look, God never talks to Eve. But here, two of them were naked, the man and the wife, yet they felt no shame. Now the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild beasts that God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You shall not eat of any tree of the garden'?" The woman replied to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the other trees of the garden. It is only about fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden that God said, 'You shall not eat of it or touch it, lest you die.'" So, the way this is phrased does not indicate that she was ever actually spoken to by God. This seems to be an interpretation, a paraphrase of what she has been told by Adam. Which makes sense because we have so if God ever talked to her, why wouldn't it be noted here? Like we have space. We just jump from her being created to her like, yep, we can't eat of that. Okay, fucking Christ. Yeah. So, and the serpent said to the woman, "You're not going to die, but God knows that as soon as you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like divine beings who know good and bad." When the woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable as a source of wisdom, she took to its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they perceived that they were naked. And they sewed together fig leaves, and made themselves loincloths. So, there's a few things happening here. Obviously, the fruit of this tree looks exactly the same as the fruit of any other tree. Because frickin' Adam couldn't tell. Surely he had been over there and looked at the tree and been like, okay, that's the one I shouldn't eat from. But Eve hands him the fruit of it, and he is unable to recognize that that's what it is. So all of the fruits of all of the trees have to look exactly the same at this point. Yeah. They heard the sound of God moving about in the garden at the breezy time of day. And the man and his wife hid from him among the trees. And he called out, and the man said to him, and notice everywhere here it says the man. In the English translation of this, it's because the word Adam is not a name. I don't know what the hell I pointed to over here. It probably wasn't the right word. But that's what's happening. In Hebrew, Adam doesn't mean, it's not a name. It just means person. So the fact that the first person was just called person, he doesn't have a name. Nobody named him. All right, this is something that's usually lost in non-Hebrew translation. Blah, 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 blah. Where are you? I heard the sound of you in the garden and was afraid because I was naked. Then he asked, who told you you were naked? Did you eat of the tree which I had forbidden you to eat? The man said, the woman you put by my side, she gave me of the tree and I ate. What a fucking coward. And the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you've done? The serpent duped me and I ate. And yada yada yada. Because you did this, the more cursed shall you be than all cattle and all the wild beasts. On your belly shall you crawl, and dirt shall you eat all the days of your life. And that is to the serpent. Which means, prior to this, the serpent was not a snake. The serpent was turned into a snake in this moment. Okay? This is how animism works. The default original created form is like people. And the derived form, after whatever occurs, is the ultimate form, right? So originally, serpent would have been like a person. And probably a person without genitalia, right? Because recall that in Genesis 2, we derived, there's a story there that's deriving genitalia and sexual procreation and the whole process of birth, all of that, very, very beautifully and elegantly and simply. It's very nicely described. And down to details like, why don't humans have penis bones? Like, that's actually explained in there. It's not a true explanation, but like you get what I'm saying. So what's happening here, prior to this, serpent wasn't a snake. That's not what he was. He wasn't a snake. He was probably walked around like a man or something. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. They shall strike at your head, and you shall strike at their heel. So yeah, we pretty much have snakes and people tend not to get along. And to the woman he said, I will make most severe your pangs in childbearing. In pain shall you bear children, yet your urge shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. So notice here, what is happening is not an introduction of childbirth itself. What this is simply that childbirth will now hurt. So Eve is already physiologically set up to bear children. When she was removed from Adam, she would have been an exact clone of Adam at that moment. And at that moment, Adam had a vagina and a uterus. And in that moment, Adam was giving birth. So, Adam, in that moment, was a prototypical woman. And that was passed on to Eve. She was already capable of bearing children. And this right here, all it's doing is saying, childbearing will now hurt. And notice, earlier, God put Adam to sleep before Eve was born. Here, that's not what happens. It's not what happens anymore. Okay, I think that's important, because otherwise that's weird. Why is Adam being put into a deep sleep in order for Eve to be born from him? Well, yeah, it wasn't to him at that point yet. And then to Adam he said, because you did as your wife said, and ate of the tree about which I commanded you shall not eat, cursed be the ground because of you. By toil shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it sprout for you. But your food shall be the grasses of the field. By the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat, until you return to the ground. For from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And this last part should actually apply to both him and Eve. Anyway, so now we actually get a name for the woman. Finally, at this point, this is the first time that a person is actually named. I've been referring to them by their names, but they didn't have names up to this point. Neither of them had a name. Adam just means person. So yeah, the man named his wife Eve because she was the mother of all the living. And the Lord God made garments of skins for Adam and his wife and clothed them. So notice here, his wife is the mother of all the living. So I think there's some missing story here. There's some missing story here. Because, notice what I said earlier, the rib taken from Adam was probably the penis bone. And it's notable that kosher meat is from animals that lack a penis bone. She is probably, in an earlier form of this mythology, she is probably the mythological mother of a whole bunch of other types of animals besides humans. And there's probably stories explaining how, they became what they are. And that's completely missing here. And without that, this is a very strange thing. Like, what the hell are you talking about? She's the mother of all the living. What? Anyway. And the Lord God said, now that the man has become like one of us, note the plural there, knowing good and bad, what if he should stretch out his hand and take from the tree of life and eat, and live forever? So Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to till the soil from which he was taken. He drove the man out and stationed east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim and the fiery ever-turning sword to guard the way to the tree of life. Okay, so now the directions. Right? What is east and west? How do you tell time? How do you tell time before you have clocks? Before you have, right? It's by the sun. Where does the sun rise? Where does the day start? In the east. Where does the sun set? In the west. So another thing that is occurring here, you have people going from innocence to awareness of right and wrong and awareness of nakedness and being faced with responsibilities and conflict with other animals and, life, right? And as this is occurring, they're being pushed west, right, towards the setting sun. This is an allegory for how a child develops into an adult. I think that's very, very clear. All right, so you're starting off in the east. At the beginning, you're completely innocent, and as you move west, as you're forced to the west, you become more mature and more responsible, and you are now, yeah, you have to make your own food, you have to figure out all your own shit, you have to, that's what's happening here, I think. And when I was every time I've ever been to church or whatever, or anything like that, anything I've heard, Muslims talk about this, Jews talk about this, Christians talk about this. Nobody's noted these sorts of things, so I thought maybe it's fair to note some of these things that I've discerned from what's happening here. Yeah, you don't have to agree with me, of course, as always. I'm just some fucking rando on the internet. Why should you agree with me? But that's some of the things I see right there at the beginning of Genesis.